Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Uplevel Live session. We're just going to take a few moments and wait for everyone to join us.
Hello.
Hello, Espree. Hello.
Hello. I'm so excited. You guys, this is going to be amazing. So kick it off by introducing yourselves in the chat so I can get to know a little bit about who you are and what your level is in podcasting, right? Yes, I have a podcast, or no, I don't have a podcast yet, or I'm just starting. How do I get to my listeners? Because I really want to cater this to all of you. So that would help me a lot as I'm speaking to make sure this is just like the most amazing experience that we could all have together.
Yes. So people are coming in, so I'm just going to do a slow introduction here. So if this is your first time to Uplevel Live, welcome. I'm Robin Cohen. I am the co-founder of Uplevel. Uplevel is a micro-learning online experience. We do a live broadcast every Wednesday, and then in case you missed it, you can watch it again on our website, which is moveuplevel.com. And so if you're new to Zoom, which I'm sure you're not because we're all using Zoom right now, but if you're new to Zoom webinar, how it works is we want people to engage in the chat. So tell us where you're from. Like Espree said, do you have a podcast? Are you interested in starting one? All that kind of chit chat and engagement, leave it in the chat section and make sure that you always are all panelists and attendees. So you're speaking to everyone so we can see your chat as well. But when you have a question, you're going to look down below and you're going to see Q&A. So click that and start to put your questions in there as they come up during the presentation. And so without further ado, I want to introduce our guest speaker today, Mrs. Espree Devora. Is that how you pronounce your name, Devora?
Yes, everybody asks me that. There's not one way to I don't know how I even pronounce my own name, but I'm so excited to be here.
Devora, Espree Devora. So here it goes. So Espree Devora, quote, "The girl who gets it done," is the producer and host of WeAreLATech, Hello Customer, and Women in Tech podcasts. All these podcasts have been featured by Apple as noteworthy to listen to, from top charts to inspiring women's voices. Her organization, WeAreLATech, unifies the Los Angeles tech community, aka Silicon Beach, by creating content and offline experiences with a purpose to move tech professionals from digital connections to offline meaningful relationships. She has given talks on entrepreneurship and podcasting at many organizations, including USC Business School, CBS, South by Southwest, Georgetown MBA, Entrepreneur, and Pepperdine, and produces, listen to this, 24 episodes per month across her shows. Her podcast was featured in Harper's Bazaar as a top 10 podcast to listen to in 2019. And when you want to connect with her, you can connect with her on LinkedIn or Twitter at Espree Devora. Now, in this Uplevel Live session, Espree is going to take us through her process for starting a podcast and getting to your first 1,000 listeners. So if you've ever been thinking about starting your podcast, or you've even been struggling to increase your numbers, guess what? This class is for you. So welcome, Espree.
Thank you for that epic intro. I am so excited. I love seeing all these familiar names. I see Steph and Justin. I got you just thinking of starting a podcast. Emma, thank you so much for your continuous support. Todd, Steph, just so excited to be here. Thank you, Robin, for that incredible intro. We are going to get on in it. So I'm going to share my screen with everybody. Most of this, don't keep your eyes on the screen. Keep your eyes on the energy. But I am going to share the screen so you just have a vibe of what's going on. So I'm going to do that right now. And I need enabling screen sharing. So just FYI on that. And so as we get started, and as Robin gets me set up, we have an amazing hour ahead of us. So if you have no idea how to start your podcast, or even if you've just started your podcast and you're like, I don't know how to gain more listeners, I got you covered. I created a special secret formula sauce, literally, like I put it together over my years. I've been podcasting for, I believe, about 7 years now. And it just, as the years went on, I'm like, oh, this is the way that you do it. So I'm going to share that with you so that you could be producing your podcast with the utmost fluidity. So I'm going to go ahead, share the screen.
Got it?
And okay. And this is as interactive as possible. Now, can you guys all see my screen okay? Robin, am I good? Can you see that? Did I, for having a tech podcast, did I do the technology thing right? Kayleen, am I saying it right? My podcast just had its 1 year anniversary this month. That is so exciting, Kayleen. I love it. I do have the chat box open, so feel free to ask questions as we're going. Robin's going to be my co-captain on this to make sure that I get all your questions answered. So this, I definitely want this to be as interactive as possible. If you want to say hello on social, I'm at Espree Devora. Plus, just for the Uplevel community, I have 15-minute one-on-one calls. I'm going to post it in there right now. So if after this you have any questions that we didn't get into, because I know there's only so much we could cover in an hour, I got you tuned. So just I put it in the chat, so it's easy. All right, so we're going to kick it off. How to get your first 1,000 listeners with me. I think I usually create the title slide because I forget to introduce myself. Robin gave me such a beautiful introduction, so I'm going to skip that right now so we could just get into the meat of what we are talking about. So as you can see, Apple, Spotify, many different podcast platforms have featured my podcast on the homepage. It's crazy. So I'm going to show you the steps on how you could achieve the same kind of success that I've been able to achieve with my podcast. So what we're going to get into, as I talked about just a second ago, I love it, Steph. Yes, I love your energy too. I feel it through the chat. Is my secret formula, the 3 Ps and the M&Ms. And no, I'm not talking about the candy, although I do love the candy too. So the 3 Ps and the M&Ms are purpose, process, production, marketing, and monetization. And I want to really be clear that this is the exact order that I feel that every podcaster should go through. We don't usually go through this. The biggest mistakes that people make, and I'm going to tell you, like, the purpose is like a triangle of why, and I'm going to get into that. Guest, listener, and you. Process, the resources you have available, the time, people, and tools. Production, equipment, marketing, strategies, and tools. Monetization, methods to monetize. But the biggest mistake that new podcasters make, huge mistake, is they start with production first. So I think it's really important to start with the purpose first, and we're going to get into that. But before we get into that, there's a few other huge mistakes that new podcasters make, or even seasoned podcasters, they just skip the beat. And it's, again, starting with equipment first. It's not understanding that when you choose a host, you are also choosing your analytics and you're choosing the technology of movable content, whether that host has that or not, right? And we're going to get into what those things are. And funnels. A lot of podcasters and new podcasters don't even think about the listener journey. They don't even think about the funnel. So it's really important to think about your funnels. You're probably like, what is a funnel? Some of you are like, yeah, I know funnels for something else, but how does that relate for podcasting? We're going to get all into that. We're going to be getting into funnels last as a bonus. But first, I'm going to walk you through purpose, process, production, marketing, monetization. If you didn't get that order, that's a really important order. So I'm just going to go back so you could see that for a second. Purpose, process, production, marketing, monetization. It's my 5 chapters. It's really important to really follow those chapters as you go through your podcasting journey. Are you guys ready? I want to see it in the chat. All the energy. If you are ready, I am ready. So purpose. Thank you so much, Robin. I appreciate it. Hey, Brooklyn, nice to see you. So, okay, so purpose. Purpose is really important. You want to think about your triangle of why. You have your guest, you have your audience, and you have yourself. We'll go back so you can see it like right there with your eyeballs. So you have the triangle of why: guest, listener, and you. And so what that means is, a lot of people think about, I want to start a podcast because I really like X, Y, Z, but they don't think about what's important about the podcast to the audience. Where does this fit into their life? Where does it fit into, like, is it their 5 a.m. morning wake up? Is it their lunch hour session? Do they listen while they exercise? And what is it solving for them? Is it making them laugh? Like the Views podcast by David Dobrik makes me laugh. Is it educating them? Is it relatable? Like the startup podcast, where does this podcast fit in their life and why do they need to have it? Things like that will help you determine frequency, which is a huge question. How often should I come out with a new episode? And it will also help you determine duration of the podcast. So both frequency or duration are questions that I get all the time. Steph, I love your energy in the chat. I get all the time. Kaylee and I love it. Yes, Justin, love it. Okay, so it's what I get all the time, frequency and duration. It's so important to think about where you fit in your listener's life in order to answer the frequency and the duration. And so if you come out once a week, if you come out multiple times a week, and I'll give you an example, the Women in Tech podcast. Why do I used to come out 5 days a week with the Women in Tech podcast? Now we come out 3 days a week. It's because I want to champion as many women in tech around the world as I possibly can. Now, why did I move from 5 days to 3 days? I moved from 5 days to 3 days because the listeners started saying they were having a hard time keeping up, and that's not good, right? So I dialed it back to 3 days a week. Now, why do I give all guests their own episode rather than combining different episodes to feature as many people as possible? Because I want to have that exclusivity of shine that each guest gets to shine on their own for their own episode, right? I don't want to take that away from them. So when you're thinking about the production of it, it all starts with purpose. The purpose of this show feeds into the process, which feeds into the production, which feeds into marketing, which feeds into monetization, right? And then you have your guest. Now, the why of the guest. Why are they showing up in the show? Why is this so important to them, right? This is really key to figure out. You lead with your mission. You are not asking your guest for a favor or your potential guest for a favor. You are inviting your potential guest to be a part of your journey, to be a part of your mission. And so if you're not clearly aligned with what your mission is, it's impossible to be able to invite someone onto that mission with you and then to know where the value is for the listener. Does that all make sense? Right? So like for you, you really want to think about, why is this important? Why do I want to champion women in tech around the world? Because if I heard all the ways that women are held back in the tech industry or in the workforce, I wouldn't have built the first action sports social network. I wouldn't have raised money. I didn't understand and have the knowledge that I wasn't supposed to be able to achieve those things. So I just went after it. So when I created the Women in Tech podcast, and I have several podcasts, I'm just focusing on that one for the example. I have the WeAreLATech podcast. I'm just coming out with the Brag podcast, which is business women reaching awe-inspiring greatness. But I'm going to focus on the Women in Tech podcast for now. And so if I wanted to show an example of other women who have achieved, so that we have more examples for all people, alien, Black, white, guy, girl, it doesn't matter. Just all examples of people. I want everybody to be a listener, being exposed to examples of abundance. Because if we see what's possible, it creates a more open space for us to achieve more as listeners. And so that's what I wanted to create with the Women in Tech podcast. All right. So we have the triangle of why, guest, listener, and you really want to sort that out. Then when you have your purpose, again, this is the baby steps leading up to monetization later. When you have your purpose, then you start to understand like what your monetization opportunities are, right? So a lot of people say, oh, I need a bazillion listeners in order to monetize. I need to be like Joe Rogan. No, right? You think about the different methods of monetization. We're going to get into that later, but it doesn't matter how many listeners you have. It matters what goals you have, and then the listeners you have should complement the goals you have, right? And so if your goals are to get a client a month or something like that, then it just depends. Maybe you could have 100 listeners a month and you could still meet that metric. So you really want to be thinking about what your you is. What are you going to be tracking to make sure this all makes sense? So then we're going to lead in right now and ask any questions you have on purpose. And then we're going to lead into process right now. So if you have any questions on purpose, I'm going to take a beat for like 30 seconds just to see if there's any questions in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to move forward to process. And while I'm taking that beat, I'm just going to go back in the slides again. So we have the next up is process. So these are, and I just have this up for you. So I know some people like to read things visually. So now you know, like, okay, this is like a note of what we're talking about. So process, it's the resources you have available in order to produce your show, right? So time is a resource. If you say I only have an hour a week, then you only have an hour a week. If you say like I only have $100 a month, then you only have $100 a month. If you say I have $1 million a month, then you have $1 million a month. If you say I have an assistant that can help, if you say I don't have an assistant, if you say I want an assistant, every single kind of resource that you want, that you have available, and or that you desire to have, list them all out. You want to start dreamlining your processes, because your processes are going to flow in to what your production will be, what your marketing strategy will be, and what your monetization methods will be. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay. So process. So you're thinking about like, do I want an editor? Do I want to edit myself? If you want to edit yourself, the one thing that I really love is Sound Studio for Mac. There's GarageBand too. I use Sound Studio for Mac when I first got started. If you want to outsource the editing, amazing resource. You guys get ready with your notes, because I'm going to drop tools like no other. I am tool obsessed. There's a great resource for editing. It's only $500 a month. It's called usehatch.fm. Use hatch.fm. It's new. It's American based. It's phenomenal. I told the founders that I didn't think that they should be launching the company, because like it's just too good to be true, and it's a lot of work on their end, but they're very passionate about it. So use hatch.fm, amazing editing resource. If you're looking for artistic support, or to have like somebody to do your beats, one way to get your beats done is SoundCloud. Look for the emerging artists and ask them if they do a beat. Or there's Epidemic Sound. You could utilize a tool called Epidemic Sound. There's Fiverr, Fiverr.com. On Fiverr, you could find people to do your podcast cover art. You could find people to do an intro, like to host it for you. You could find like an epic sound intro. So many things. So just search podcasting on Fiverr and just start looking at people's portfolios and seeing which ones you think may be the right fit for you. A lot of people have used Upwork. I've used Upwork to find editors, but I would stick with Fiverr, use Hatch. I want to give you guys the most streamlined pathway to success. I don't want you to have to be going through a lot of people, because you don't yet have the experience to know, like, is this person BSing me or not, right? So if you look at Fiverr and you see their portfolio, you know what you're going to be getting. I completely trust to use Hatch, that kind of thing. The main tools that you want to use to start dreamlining and processing. Workflowy is an amazing bullet point tool, because what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about you guys creating your process is I'm thinking about you doing like, kind of like, what's that word called, where like you have a brain, you put everything down on your brain and you write, okay, I have 1 hour a week, you write all those kind of things down. And then you're like, okay, here are the resources I have. I have this much money, or And then and everything that you like want to delegate. And even though you don't know how to podcast yet, you know what you have and what you don't have, right? And you know the dream scenario that you'd like to pick. So when someone asks me, well, how many hours should I invest in doing my podcast a week? I ask, well, how many hours do you have? How many hours do you want to invest? And let's build the podcast around what you have available. So that's what I mean by process. You're figuring out the time you have, figuring out the people you have, and you're figuring out the tools you have accessible in order for you to create the process of your show. Okay. Any questions there? I'm going to take a beat again while we move into the next one, which is production. But I'm going to take a beat really quick and I'm going to read this. I see Robin included the links in the chat if you haven't seen it. Steph is saying, love the validation, and you could even do this with limited resources. Totally, Steph. I love it. Tra, am I saying your name right, Tra? I hope so. I'm so glad you're enjoying it. Steph is saying like, oh yeah, love it. Yes, great. You see the possibilities. I love it. Great. And if you guys have any more questions, keep the questions coming. I try to make this as interactive as possible, and your questions are really important to me. So I'm going to move back in the slides again, because that way you could just have like a little note of like what topic we're on and where we are in the process, right? The process is now production. Okay. So you're building your production off of what you discovered in your purpose and in your process, right? So I produce every single podcast, my WeAreLATech podcast, my Women in Tech podcast, Brag podcast, my premium private podcast, my Espree Devora podcast. Like, I produce every podcast in a different way to complement the process and to complement the purpose. So let's talk about, again, since we're using my Women in Tech podcast as an example, let's talk about the Women in Tech podcast. How do I feel about Anchor, Jill? I will get to that as well in production. So it's a great time to be asking that. So Women in Tech podcast, I produce that, let's say pre-pandemic. It's with an H1 recorder. It's a travel show. I take my H1 recorder and I go and I travel around the world interviewing women in tech. Why do I do it that way? Because I get to know their culture. I get to see what the office space they're in. When I'm in Bosnia and I see bullet holes on a building, I get to understand what they had to experience to become who they are today. It's extraordinary. My WeAreLATech podcast is an in-studio podcast. I had pre-pandemic, I had a studio in Santa Monica, and now I don't know how long it's going to be before we could truly be in person again. So I will be emphasizing and highlighting all the remote resources you have available. No worries there. But pre-pandemic, it would be an in-studio show. And what was really important to me is when one guest was coming and another guest was leaving, that those two guests could meet one another in my studio, because it's about facilitating community. And I'm going to be getting into that when we talk about marketing. I'm going to be getting into how you want to architect the world of your podcast. Your podcast lives beyond the audio file. So you really want to think about what are all the elements and aspects of the world of my podcast, and what type of world am I trying to create, right? And so, yes, the Women in Tech, I'd have my H1, WeAreLATech, I did it in studio. My premium podcast, I did utilizing a tool called Callcast, or I just do it in my voice memo app. Yes, my voice memo app on my phone. I select the equipment I need based on the purpose that I'm trying to achieve and the process that I want to follow with the time I have. My Brag podcast is very limited, right? So with my Brag podcast, I want to keep it so simple. So I might use a conference line. It's new. I'm producing it right now. I may use a conference line. I may use Callcast. I want to keep it phone only. I don't want to log into the computer. So it's kind of like that. You figure out the equipment you need based on your process and based on your purpose, right? Any questions? Let me know in the chat. And I think Robin put a note to put questions as well in the Q&A section too. So do that. I'm looking at both. I just want to make sure to give you guys as much as possible, right? So let's talk about remote tools and let's talk about hosting, because that's what's going on right now. And Jill had this great question, is how do I feel about Anchor? So there are so many options out there, right? It could be completely overwhelming. So hosting is how you get your podcast on Apple, on Spotify, and you really want to think about, remember in the beginning I said the biggest mistake that podcasters make when it comes to selecting a host is that analytics and analytics and movable content. So it's actually with your host that you can have analytics and that you do or don't have movable content. So let me get into that. So I don't know the analytics of all the hosting platforms. You will have to research that. I'm with Simplecast. Simplecast claims that they have the best analytics, right? You want to check what is your analytic capability with the host you pick. That's really important. Now, I am not obsessed with analytics, but I do want to have the best analytics available to me if I need them. Now, the reason I'm not obsessed with analytics, because I'm obsessed with my mission. I'd rather be obsessed with my mission and be serving one person than obsessed with analytics and forgetting why I became a podcaster in the first place, right? And so I do not check my analytics often, but I do want to have the best analytics available to me when I need them. Movable content. What is movable content? So unfortunately, the majority of companies who have movable content are ad networks. And when we get into monetization, which is chapter 5 of the flow, is you're going to hear why like ad networks may not be the best option for you. You'll hear about all the options. But right now, ad networks have the movable content technology. So if you join an ad network, It means if you created over 700 episodes like I have, and you want a sponsor integrated into all 700 episodes rather than just the future episodes, you could in one click essentially just swap out the ad, right? Or you could do it with your intro, or you could do it when you say contact me at social media handle, and maybe you change that social media handle. You could just swap them all out. If you don't have movable content, you have to manually do that, or you just don't do it at all, right? Huge headache. Simplecast has movable content, but just for enterprise companies. I was hoping they would release it to indie creators. I don't know if they will. Bcast is a new host that came out that claims they have movable content. I don't know how their analytics are. I have not used Bcast yet. Those are the only two solutions I know for indie creators, and I don't know if Simplecast will make it available to indie creators so far with movable content. The other hosting providers that I've talked to have said that they're not building movable content technology yet, right? And so that's something really important to know, because as a new podcaster, you sign up for your host and you're like, I just want to get on Apple or Spotify. I mean, I was there too. And Simplecast made it that simple to get on Apple or Spotify. But later as a professional podcaster, I'm like, wait, I need to have the best analytics. And I was like, thankful. Oh, you know, I was with a company that had great analytics. And then when I discovered movable content technology, that was a whole nother thing. Right? And so these are things to think about as a new podcaster starting a podcast. If, and even as a seasoned podcaster, are you giving your podcast the best chance to succeed? Right? Does that all make sense? Again, ask any questions you have in the chat, in the Q&A, everywhere. I mean, I care about you so much that I will click on all the places to get to all your questions as much as possible as we can in this hour. I'm just so thankful that I can serve you. Okay, so now we're gonna go back. We covered analytics, movable content, and hosting. Now, Jill asked, how do I feel about Anchor? So Anchor is free. I feel like Anchor is for the hobbyist. If this is just something where like you're kicking around having a good time, Anchor is great, in my opinion. Anchor is gray area whether they own your content or not. I don't really know. I don't want to take that chance. Simplecast and Libsyn are for the professional podcaster. As far as perception goes, like how they are in the industry, right? I'm a super fangirl of Transistor. Transistor hosts amazing podcasts, like one of my favorite companies, Basecamp. It's co-founded by Justin Jackson, who I highly suggest you follow. Justin Jackson is just a leading educator in the podcast industry, so find him on Twitter. He's just fantastic. If you're a woman in podcasting, make sure to follow She Podcast join the She Podcast Facebook group on Facebook. Amazing resource. Steph, the name was Justin Jackson. Justin Jackson. And I think his Twitter handle is like MI Jackson or something, but maybe, or MI Justin. I'm not sure. It's a really weird Twitter handle. Robin maybe can find it in Twitter for us. So, so you want to think about, so I'm a super fangirl of Transistor. I can't go with Transistor because they don't have plans to do movable content. Not everybody needs that. That's why you want to go back to your purpose and your process to figure out what your needs are. I'm a full-time podcaster. This is what I do for a living. I deal with a lot of different opportunities in terms of advertising integration, sponsorship integration, all the kind of things. I need these tools to be the best podcaster I could possibly be for how my podcast business is built. This may be entirely different for how your podcast business is built, but it's something to think about. And then, yeah, so we have Libsyn, Simplecast are like the two pros. I believe Joe Rogan's on Libsyn. Like Simplecast is really trusted with the huge companies as well. Like Facebook does their podcast on Simplecast. Simplecast also has an internal tool called Recast that is great for marketing. There are other tools that I'm going to get into, like Headliner and everything when we get to the marketing section. But Simplecast, the customer service, Libsyn, extraordinary. I love the team there. People really support people at Simplecast. Like I said, Justin Jackson at Transistor is just such a community champion. I really appreciate the work he does in the industry. And then there's this new player on the block, Bcast, and I haven't fully researched them, but I have bought an account and I'm excited and I want to see what they're about, right? And then there's Anchor, which so many people know because of Spotify. So, okay, so that we talked about analytics, we talked about movable content, we talked about hosting. Jill, let me know if that answers your question in the chat. I want to really make sure that I'm supporting you. Okay, so now we're going back and we're going to chapter 4, which is, and if you have any other production questions, let me know. But the things like Production, what mic do I get? Well, you get the mic that serves your purpose and your process, right? So like I said, right now I'm using an Audio-Technica 2100, because it has the USB and the XLR. A lot of professional podcasters use an XLR, or a lot of professional people in audio use XLR. XLR is what I use in studio. I plug into an H6 Zoom, not Zoom like Zoom, but Zoom, the piece of equipment. I love my H6, but then remotely, oh yes, oh my gosh, I'm almost skipping over remote. I'm so sorry. Okay, so remote, so important is, okay, here are your options for remote. Are you guys ready? Okay, so yes, Kayleen loves her H6 too. Yes, and Kayleen, yes, you are in She Podcast as well. Tag me in there. Say hello. I love it. Perfect. So the remote options you have, are you guys ready for remote options? We have Squadcast, which is great. They're going to have video recording soon, but they deliver high quality audio. Full disclosure, I have since become a advisor on the Squadcast team, but I've been a customer since they were a startup, well, they're still a startup, but since they were brand new years ago. Squadcast is for the highest quality audio. They have a phenomenal backup system, so you never lose your audio file. So like if the internet goes out, or the computer goes out, or whatever, they have a great backup system. The other great thing is Squadcast sends, like they record my computer, they record your guest computer, and then they upload it into the cloud and spit down the local files to you. So you have the original files, right? That's so important when you're talking about audio quality, because if the files get mixed up, like compressed in the sky, in the cloud, then you have lesser quality audio. So important. They are coming out with recording video. I believe that's going to be around the end of October. Now, I don't know Riverside.fm, but as far as I know, they do video as well. And I believe they have live audience integration. I have not used it yet myself, but I do want to check it out. Callcast.co I've published a podcast with Callcast. It's the Espree podcast. I believe it's Espree.callcast.co. It's like not even like, it's just like a test podcast, but Callcast is great. So Callcast was built to make podcasting accessible by anyone, like by anyone at all. And you do it all through your phone. So you install the app, the Callcast app, but your guests don't have to, which is so cool. So once you have the app, you could set up a phone call with any of your guests, and then you guys just have the phone call. And then with a couple clicks, it's live on Apple, on Spotify, and all the places. They make it so simple for you just to have a podcast if you just don't want to worry about any of the tech, right? That's what Callcast is for. Then you have Zencastr, which is audio only. I don't know too much about Zencastr. I have used it before. There's no video. I don't know if they're building video. They may be, and I don't know what their backup system is, but a lot of people like Zencastr. If you want that rapport vibe, then you want Squadcast so you could see the person. Squadcast aim is to simulate in person as much as possible. And let's see, what else for remote? I think that covers it. I mean, there's probably so many more out there, you guys, but these are the ones that are like top of the game. So we have Zencastr, Riverside.fm, Callcast.co, and Squadcast. I believe it's Squadcast.fm. I should know that, but anyway, I think it's Squadcast. Maybe it's, I don't think it's .com. I think it's .fm. But anyway, and I think I have a thing. I do not get anything for this, but I have that promo code. I don't know what it gives you. I have no idea what it gives you, and I get nothing, but it's just a thing that I have. Okay, so I put that in the chat, so you have a promo on Squadcast if you want that. The code is Friends of Espree if you can't see the chat for some reason. Okay, so that's remote tools. Before I move on to the next chapter, the marketing chapter, we have about 20 minutes left, and I really want to make sure we get to your Q's and A's too. Well, any questions right now? Is there anything that I could answer for you right now? And I'm just going to scroll through real quick to make sure I'm not missing anything. And also just an FYI to Robin is that I can't see the Q&A section. So Robin and I are going to get to the Q&A section together, like toward the end, because I think she has to monitor that one. But I have the chat open for now. And I see Steph is saying Zencastr is in beta with video, so that's good to know. And Kayleen absolutely loves Zencastr, so that's really good. She says they're about to launch a video. Awesome. Yeah, so all these are great. So you just want to kind of like look at all of them and see which ones are best for you and your needs and how they function and who you like best as teams. I mean, I'm really into customer experience. So I look at companies like this is why even though I can't personally use Transistor, I love Transistor because their customer experience is phenomenal. Like Justin Jackson's contribution to the community is so just outstanding. I can't not be a fan, even though unfortunately I can't be a customer, right? Okay. So now we're getting into, yes, Kayleen says Zencastr is super easy to use too. Okay, so good to know. We want to keep things easy. We want to keep things in a state of ease. Now, getting back to the topic, how to get your first 1,000 listeners. You're probably saying, you haven't given me tactics yet. However, I have. Identifying with the purpose is what is going to create your show to be magnetic for listeners and for guests and for people to want to share it. If you don't have your purpose dialed in 100%, you are going to miss some traction. You're going to miss the intent. You're going to miss marketing opportunities. That is how you get to your 1,000. I'm going to get into marketing tools right now and all this stuff. But if you don't have your purpose dialed in, and you don't have your processes dialed in, you are not giving yourself the best chance to succeed. And let me give you an example. So we're going to get to chapter 4 right now, marketing. So in chapter 4 right now, marketing, you think, I know some of you already have a podcast. Some of you don't have a podcast yet, right? So for those of you who don't have a podcast yet, you can't possibly know how many listeners you're going to have the first month. For those of you who do have a podcast, you do know how many listeners you have, right? Okay. So for those of you who don't know how many listeners you could have yet, you write down a list of experiments. I don't call it marketing. I call it experiments. I feel like marketing makes it feel like a demand, like this has to work, or I'm going to be really upset if this doesn't work. Experiments is like, it might work, it might not work, and I'll find out which ones work. I'll get rid of the ones that don't, and I'll scale up the ones that do, right? It's just so much more loving, right? And so we want to have a list of experiments. We want to execute on those experiments. For those of you who don't have a podcast, after you have all the experiments, you execute on the experiments, you see how many listeners you get that first month. Now you have a realistic number of what you could project for month 2, for month 3, for month 4, etc. For those of you who already have a podcast, have that list of experiments that should be outlined in your processes. You're going back to processes at that point. Have your list of experiments and like X out the ones that aren't working. Make sure you're tracking them. And we're going to be getting into funnels in a second. Make sure you're tracking your experiments, right? And then seeing what the outcome is of the experiments. Are they driving your listener growth? And understand why in your world you have a podcast. How is this podcast serving you in the growth and what you're trying to do? If you're trying to be a huge podcaster, are your experiments and your processes matching that so that you could set yourself up for success? If you're trying to gain clients, are you tracking how many clients you're gaining and how many listeners you need to get that many clients, and averaging out for every 100 listeners, I get 1 client? Are you tracking those things meticulously? So important. I think the thing that people miss in marketing is they miss creating funnels. And I've been using that word funnel so much. There's a thing called a listener journey, right? Raise your hand if you've heard of a listener journey. I feel like I'm not going to see too many hands raised because like most people don't think about funnels in the podcasting industry. We think about funnels when we have a jewelry commerce store. We think about funnels when we're doing Facebook ad campaigns, hopefully, or else you're losing money. We think about funnels in so many types of business, but we don't think about funnels in podcasting. Why is that? A podcast itself, is it the ultimate destination that where you want someone to end up? Oh, that's so cool. Kayleen has heard of it. That's awesome, Kayleen. High five to that. So is it the place where you want the person to end up, or is it part of their journey and where you want them to end up happens after? I like to say, with a guest interaction with a podcast host, that's where thought leadership and connection happens. The connection happens with the guest and it happens in thought leadership, but not necessarily with the listener. With the listener, yes, you're building credibility, but the connection with the listener doesn't happen unless you create the connection with the listener in your world. Where's the listener going? Do you have a digital platform? Do you have an email list? What community? Do you have events? Do you have Zoom hangouts? What community do you have post-listening where that listener can continue on to be a part of your journey? Do you have that mapped out? if it's the end goal, why? Like, why is your podcast the end goal? It's okay that it's an end goal. It could totally be, but understand it with intention. I met this guy, I can't think of his name right now, in Amsterdam, huge business guy. I need to like remember his name. It's crazy, but he's famous for to-do lists. He says he even writes down the things that he doesn't want to do to actively cross them out. So it's with intention to what he doesn't want to do. So understand your flow and what you are purposely doing and what you don't want to be doing. Consciously make those decisions, right? So with marketing, you want to think about your listener journey. Where are they finding you? And this breaks down to Pinterest and TikTok are phenomenal billboard marketing. I call them billboard marketing. So if there's specific formulas, I mean, this is way too much for just an hour, but there's specific formulas with Pinterest and with TikTok to drive listenership to a podcast or to other areas, right? And the podcast may be part of that funnel. And then YouTube is phenomenal for SEO. It's the second largest search engine in the world. So utilize YouTube, have highlights. And people are asking me all the time, well, should I have the full episode or what should I have? Should I have video at all? You don't have to be recording video in order to have your podcast on YouTube. I do suggest having just clips of your podcast on YouTube rather than having the full episode. If you do have the full episode, it should be because you're trying to be a convenience to your listener, meeting your listener to where they want to listen. But the highlights of your podcast can just be like 10-minute or less episodes, and they're for SEO. So you may even have an entirely different title on those YouTube videos than the actual podcast because you're building out for keyword. Great tools for that is like Ahrefs. I love Ahrefs. There's SEMrush. Just you utilize a keyword tool. Again, that's like way more. That's that's something to get into like in a huge workshop, but like that's not. If you have questions about that, I put my link at the top to the calendar. We could have a 15-minute call. I know Rob and I have talked about giving away a full-on like one-on-one consultation. So definitely enter in if you want that full-on one-on-one. But for just a sampling 15-minute, just a quick question follow-up call, feel free to utilize that Calendly, right? That link that I put above. And so with YouTube, you put it's for search engine. You could even change your title. And then like Twitter, Instagram, all these things. Are those maybe like the destination as they're already finding you going through your journey? Or are they the top level of how people are finding you in the first place? I feel that Instagram is more story sharing, right? And then that leads into another question I get asked a lot is about promoting your episodes, meaning like you're saying my episode is coming out Monday, Like no one's looking at Monday on the Wednesday before. This is the internet. People are in and out. We all have ADD now, right? And so I call it FYI marketing. And you want it to be instant click kind of stuff, right? And so for FYI marketing, just really be mindful that you don't want to be a big infomercial. It's more advantageous to you to empower your guests and your listeners to share your show. So think about the funnels of empowerment. What is your empowerment funnel so that you empower your guests and your listeners to share your show? Are you creating trailers using Headliner app? Do you have Simplecast and have the recast feature? Are you using Wave? There's another tool, I think it's wave.co. There's so many great ways to create trailers, and it makes someone feel so special, right? It makes a guest feel so special. I have my teammate Janice who manually follows up with every guest with their trailer, with their episode link, with graphics that we've created. We never ask them to share because I don't believe in that. But we do say, here are these awesome assets that we created for you. If you use them as you'd like. And then most people, more times than not, totally post them everywhere. And how great is it for you if other people are referring you rather than you telling people what to do? Look at me, look at me, look at me. Don't you get more excited when a friend says, oh my gosh, you have to check out XYZ, right? And so you want to be more referable. And by doing that, you want to empower people. And people in a bathroom line will be like, oh, did you hear the podcast episode? I mean, this happens all the time. You want people to be mentally subscribed to your show. You don't want to rely on technology for them to be subscribed. Like, Apple, they may change from an Apple app listener to an Overcast listener, utilize different apps like podcast players. And if they're not mentally subscribed to your show, your show may get lost, right? So you really want to hone in on how to be mentally subscribed, how to be at the top of mind for your listeners, and how to let your listeners' networks know about your podcast. Does that make sense? And I'm just going to look at the questions real quick. Yeah, I've got it. And Robin, thank you so much for taking notes. So if you guys have any questions, we have a bunch of cues for Q&A. So I'm going to blast through monetization. I know you guys are like, no, but I really want to make sure to get through the Q&A. And so, so monetization, there's so many different options, right? And so really in monetization, be thinking about funnels, be thinking about the offer you have at your end. So there's different types of monetization. For sponsorship. Check out Podcorn. Has great sponsorship opportunities, and you could get client leads. Check out Calendly to make it really easy for someone to pay you. And FYI, the 15-minute thing is pro bono. You don't have to pay, but Calendly does have that feature if you want it. And check it, you could have merchandise. There's a Printify if you want to start creating t-shirts really easy, different kind of merchandise. You could have affiliate links. There's a company called Magic Links that makes it really easy to have affiliate links. You could also have an Amazon store. There's so many different methods to monetize your podcast, but you don't even need to monetize and I charge a flat rate for my show. So instead of doing the classic, like 1,000 listens for X amount of money, I just charge a flat rate and I integrate my partners into the world. So what assets do you have? Do you speak? Do you have a meetup group? Like what are your assets? Make a list of those assets, and then those assets are integrating with the partner. So you don't have to reserve it to just the audio file, right? Does that make sense? And there's so much more that I could get into, but I know we have so many amazing questions. So I'm going to invite Robin to rejoin me again and guide me through the Q&A. And if you have other specific monetization questions, feel free to ask them in the Q&A right now. We're going to stay focused on that screen.
All right. Love it. Okay.
Are you guys loving it? Write in the chat so far, what's been your biggest takeaway? I would love to hear as Robin starts pulling up the first questions. Okay. Yay, Try, I'm so happy. I really hope, is it Try My Jean? Oh, I wish I could pronounce your name right. Oh, and SEM Rush. Yeah, great. Love it. Yes.
Okay. So.
Mimi. So I say Mimi. Okay, perfect. I will start saying, oh, perfect. I'll start saying Mimi. Oh, I love it that you guys are getting so much value out of the resources. Awesome.
Okay, here we go. This is going to be like rapid fire Q&A. We have 10 questions, which is like amazing, right?
Amazing.
So I love it because I think that people are just so curious about podcasts. They really have kind of come up in the ranks lately. Like when I advertised it, I was like, do you remember when everyone was told that you need to start a blog? Well, now everyone needs to start a podcast. Okay, so Here goes. And we're going to do rapid fire. Justin Jones asks, what if monetization is not your goal? Does it need to be?
Great question. Great question, Justin. Okay, so I would prefer that monetization is not your goal. Monetization was not my goal. I wanted to make sure my podcast was sustainable, but monetization does not need to be your goal whatsoever. It's better that your goal is, in my humble opinion, I would prefer your goal to be the mission of your podcast and why you want to create your podcast and what you want to get out of the world. So many people ask me about monetization that I included in. I don't believe podcasting is a way to get rich quick, or I think probably a blog is easier to monetize than a podcast, right? But like right now, Robin was saying yesterday, man, podcasting is like the new blog. It is. It's like everybody wants to have a podcast. So really focus on what your goals have and just put, what was that, Robin?
It's like in a good way. That
oh, yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. And so just really focus on your goals, Justin, and really put a lot of attention to funnels. Check out the tool Funnel Mappy. Maybe MindMeister, which is a mind mapping tool. And like, as I mentioned before, Workflowy. These are all great ways for you to map out funnels. And I think I have a code for Workflowy. So toward the end, I'll put that in the chat too. So, so that you have a free account there as well. Okay. And then should I read the next question, Robin, or do you want to read it?
No, I will. Okay. Bill Goldsberry, she asked, so she's been building on an idea for a podcast for a while, right? To do solo or with a host. How do you plan a show with another person or even just solo?
Sure. So think about, again, what is your mission for the show? What do you want to accomplish? What are your resources, Jill, that you have available? I remember I was consulting with someone who was thinking about having a show as a guest, but was really limited on time. And I was like, why not just have a solo show? His goal was to form relationships with people in a certain industry. I'm like, well, just be the thought leader in that industry. You don't need to, really think about the goals that you want to accomplish with your show, again, in the purpose. This is why we start with purpose first, and then work backwards to like, what helps serve that mission? Is it to have a solo show, or is it to have guests? Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to drop down to Kaylee and I'm going to go back up. Okay, so Kaylee asks, I'm curious what you think about hosting on your own website. I use Squarespace and my website and podcasts are all hosted on there. I get analytics from a third-party site. Would you still suggest a specific podcasting host?
So that's such a good question, Kayleen. So most of the podcast hosts do give you a one page. I even use the one page. If you go to womenintech.fm, you'll see my Simplecast powered page. I am switching over. There's a great tool called, I think it's called Pod Pages. It's new. So check out Pod Pages. And that's specifically made for podcasters. But I think, listen, if you already have your website on Squarespace, just host it there. Now you mean hosting. Oh, you don't mean hosting your website. You mean hosting your podcast on Squarespace. So in the past, this is crazy, Kayleen. So when you got to 100 episodes, they would start deleting your original episodes. Now, I do think they fixed that, but I don't know. My dad used to say, if you go to a steak restaurant, eat a steak. I feel like go to a professional site that is an expert in that field. And I feel like a website host isn't in the business of being a podcast host, but integrating the two together, having your podcast on your Squarespace, totally, like, make sure they're all like, it's essentially like Squarespace is showing the whole thing, but I wouldn't power the podcast. At least I wouldn't trust it. Right? Yeah. I wouldn't even trust using SoundCloud for my podcast, because SoundCloud is in the music business for musicians in a certain way. And so I do use SoundCloud for marketing purposes, but I don't use it as my primary host. Yeah. I hope that helps. And Kayleen, if it doesn't help, like, let me know.
Okay. So next question, and I think this is great. Todd asked, what first got you interested in podcasting, Espree?
Okay, so this is a crazy story. Like, when I first started in 2012 with the idea of WeAreLATech, I created a video series. I shot 12 episodes. I had a partner. It was a video series. It's because I built the first action sports social network, and then that was reinvented into an action sports media network. And I'd miss creating high quality video content to empower and celebrate people. So what I did is I'm going to do this for the LA Tech community. And unfortunately, my partner let me down, and he didn't edit any of the 12 episodes that we shot. And I was just heartbroken. So I got re-inspired when I discovered podcasting on a European backpacking trip. I'm like, oh, podcasting, I could be self-taught and I never have to rely on anyone again. So I taught myself how to podcast, and then I utilized the platform to celebrate people as I wanted to do. Yeah. And now I have a team that I work with. That they work internally with me. But in the beginning, I did everything myself.
Awesome. I love it. Okay. This one's coming in from Steph. Did you join the Podcast Academy?
Yes, recently. Yes, I did. Wait, is that the same Steph, the Steph that I know? Because I don't know Steph's last name. Yes, Steph, is that, yes, oh my God, Steph, yes. I joined it because you told me to join it, so I joined it this week. Yes, I joined the Podcast Academy. Everybody join the Podcast Academy. Hey, Steph, can you put it in the chat, the link to the Podcast Academy? Oh, the price goes up tomorrow. So it's $50 a year or forever. I can't remember right now. And then it's $100 per year. And then tomorrow's $100. So join today if you want to be part of the Podcast Academy. Great call out, Steph. I really appreciate it. By the way, Steph is an amazing evangelist in the podcasting space. I highly recommend you connect with Steph as well. I've just never met someone like her who truly champions like the information of podcasting in these community environments. It's really, really cool. And we had an opportunity to talk on the phone, and I really appreciate her. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Okay, I'm going back up. Okay, Justin Jones again. What microphones do you use in the studio?
Great question, Justin. So I have like 1 million microphones. I have so many, from the Shure to everything else. I will tell you, this is one I use today just with my iPhone. I know you're asking about it in the studio, but just real quick, this is with my iPhone. It's the Shure. Can you guys all see that? And you see it looks like that. Let's see what I really like it. It actually makes it simple. It's the MV88 that I use with my iPhone. I use multiple ones with my iPhone. FYI, I also have a Rode attachment. I have all sorts of things. Let's see. Here it is. Hold on. Here's another one I use with my iPhone. So this is one of them. Let's see. So they look like this with my iPhone. Like, really, it's whatever works to tell your story. So in the studio, I've used the Audio Technica 2100, this one. I use the Shure SM58. I have so many. I have so many because I used to own my action sports media company. So I just have like a ton of different brands. But I use all XLR and the H6. Those are the primary. I use XLR, cables, and H6 in the studio. Justin, let me know in the chat if that answers your question enough, or you have another specific question. I'd love to help you.
And so I'm just going to actually do like a part B to that question. Where do you go to buy your equipment? Is like there a specific, like, is there like a one-stop shop where you can just buy all of this?
Oh, that's a great question. So I actually want to create an Amazon store that has everything, but I'm terrible. See, funnels, you guys. I miss that in my funnel, right? And so I do want to create an Amazon store that has all of it. I buy it either on Amazon. I bought my H6 on Craigslist. I do check Craigslist. There's a great site called Let Go on OfferUp. And so maybe you get things at a discount. So like I bought my H6 from a drummer who didn't need it anymore on Craigslist. I bought this one on Amazon. At conferences, oh my gosh, you guys, I got my H1 Zoom at South by Southwest trade show. So at trade shows, they have discounts because the vendors are there. So at trade shows, I always look out for mic gear at trade shows, like backup drives, that kind of stuff. Does that help, Robin?
Yeah, totally.
And Justin, because it's a segue with mics, Justin asked, do you need a studio room or just a quiet space? Great question. So I have this, hold on. I have that, which is like a mobile thing. It's called the Snap Recorder. I don't think they make them anymore, but to answer Robin's question again, I got that off a Kickstarter. But on Amazon, you could find similar things right now. I did use a sound studio. You don't need a sound studio. Like right now, I'm doing my podcast in here and I use that, right? And
can we just say how cool her room is? Like, look at that.
So funny. Thank you.
I love it.
Thank you. And I use a car. I know that's crazy, but a car is an amazing sound studio. A closet is an amazing sound studio. So I would just like right now, if I close the door, it would be better sound. So I would just kind of listen in and see what makes a difference. Another mic, by the way, that I really love that one of my guests were using were the NT95 by Rode. Oh my gosh, it's a USB only mic, but it comes with a pop filter and it sounded amazing. So that was the NT95. And I'm planning on ordering one myself.
Okay. I love this question. So why should someone start a podcast now? Why?
Sure. So I'll answer why should someone start a podcast now, but I also just want to mention one more piece of equipment, which is the Mevo. A Mevo has great audio and it's great if you want to do video. So if you want to do video, you could either do video live, you could do a podcast. My Mevo is over there. Here, I'll show it. One sec.
Please hold.
I'm coming back. You can see I have the Mevo over here. Can you guys see it? The chat box is blocking my screen. So like I have the extender and then let's see, I'll move the chat real quick. So yeah. You guys, yeah. So I have the extender and I have a tripod and I have the little, and this is it. So I travel with this, you guys, all the time. It's like really, really great, really high audio quality and really high video quality. And you could either go live or record. So whatever works for you. So why start a podcast now? If for me, podcasting is art. Like I am painting audio. I started a podcast because it's my form of expression. It's my artwork. Each show is art because people have also asked me, why do you have multiple shows? I don't think necessarily you should have multiple shows. I actually think it's a lot of extra work that you shouldn't have multiple shows. For me, each show is a piece of art and I am very mission driven, right? So my brag podcast that I just created, Business Women Reaching Awe-Inspiring Greatness, is because I feel as a culture, women don't brag enough. I don't brag enough. I wanted to create a platform for people to brag, right? Like each one is an art form. Women in tech, I wanted to show people what's possible. Listeners will walk away feeling if she can do it, so can I. My WeAreLATech podcast, I wanted to highlight LA tech companies and talent for listeners to walk away feeling like quickly immersed into the LA tech culture, right? And so every single podcast I have, my Hello Customer podcast where I interviewed large brands like Zappos and Levi's, was how large companies deliver extraordinary customer experience, because I'm really passionate about customer experience. Everyone tells a story and each one is a piece of art to me. So why start a podcast? From a business perspective, could start a podcast because you want to form more meaningful relationship with your customers to increase customer retention. From an indie creator like me, because you want to share your art, you want to share that mission. From a social impact place, same thing, you want to share that mission, you want to be the catalyst of change. From a consultant or an author, because you want thought leadership, because you want client leads. There's so many reasons, and there's so many different types of podcasts, from storytelling to solo shows to entrepreneurship to interview shows. There's so many different types. So it's just like, what story do you want to share, and where does this fit in your world, and does it make sense for you? But do I think everybody needs to start a podcast? No. Do I think everybody is starting a podcast? Yes. Do I think they'll probably fade out with pod fade? That's a thing. 7 to 20 episodes. People are like, I'm not getting the listeners I wanted, so bye. Like, yeah, most podcasting is going through a surge right now. And then probably a year from now, it's going to be a lot of dead shows, because people have unrealistic expectations because they're not doing their processes. They're not doing their funnels. They're not tracking things in the right way, right? And so start a show because you need to, because you feel it in your body that this is how you need to express yourself.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Jill asked, we have 2 more questions.
Yeah.
So Jill asked, do we need to buy a mic at all, or is your computer just as good?
I say it depends on a couple things. One, just get started. Do not wait on buying a mic. The computer isn't as great as audio quality, but if you're doing a solo show, use the voice memo app in your phone. I find without headphones is better than with headphones on your phone. So if you do a voice memo, be in your closet or your car, use the voice memo without headphones. Great audio quality. I record all my personal spots that I put at the beginning of all my podcasts that way. Voice memo, no headphones, like sitting on my couch. And I make sure not to be in my living room or something, right? And so, because I know my living room is larger, so there's more air sound, right? And so just get started. It depends if it's an interview show or a solo show. It depends on audio quality, but I would say just get started. Just get started. Test things out. Don't wait on a mic. Order the mic and get started. You know what you should do first to just go is book the guest or pick the date that you're going to, or just right now when we get off, start doing your first interview. Yeah.
I love it. I like this question a lot. And you kind of touched on it, right? Because in the sense of like, okay, so why are you going to start a podcast? But maybe this is the heartbeat of that, right? The question is, what do you think podcasting can do for one's career, or if you're an entrepreneur? And I think it's interesting. I think, like, for example, let's take LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
I always encourage people, use LinkedIn, whether you have a job, you're looking for a job, you're starting a company or whatever, that you want to almost kind of like build yourself up there because of the type of platform that it is, right? More so than Instagram or Facebook or any of the others, right? So do you feel that something like podcasts can do that for one's career, like boost their career or like elevate yourself so that it can help you like land a job, or as an entrepreneur, like what can that do for you?
Yeah. And so you guys have my info as we're wrapping it up. I'm going to just do a quick screen share since this is the last question, and I'm going to answer what podcasting can do for you, if that's okay with you, Robin.
Yeah.
So podcasting is just an amazing, amazing, amazing way to develop trust amongst your community, amongst your colleagues. It's a great way. There's an awesome company called Lemon Pie. Lemon Pie is who's responsible for creating that cool resource. Use Hatch that does the editing. And Lemon By has a podcast I highly recommend called Brands the Podcast. And they talk about something where they say sometimes a potential client only has 15 minutes on a call, right? They only have something, and you could send them the podcast to get to know them more in order to build trust, right? And so you really want to be utilizing podcasting when you're thinking about the connection with the offer, because it does develop thought leadership. It can extend the conversation. It really is a sense of intimacy that you cannot find on video. There's something really trusting about someone being inside your ear that you feel like you're forming a relationship day to day. So yes, podcasting 100% elevates thought leadership, but you want to be thinking about, what does your podcast cover art look like? What is the funnel that you're walking through? What are all the different ways that it is developing leadership for it to make sense? And take a moment right now. If you have any further questions, it's on the screen, and then I'm going to remove the screen in just 1 second. You could connect with me, Espree at espreedevora.com, on email. I'm at Espree Devora on social. I posted the exclusive link in the chat as well. I'm about to stop screen share right now, so if you have any questions about that, you can ask me in the chat. But this has just been so great, Robin. Like, it's been phenomenal. Like, it's been so phenomenal. And just remember, no guest is out of reach. Remember to lead with your mission, not ask a favor, right? Track what you need to track, and that could change for everybody, right? And that you can start monetizing your podcast if you want to start monetizing before you even launch a show. Nothing is without of reach. We are creating the industry right now. I know there's a lot of podcasters, like it just crossed over 1 million podcasts or something like that, right? But like, think about how many YouTube channels there are. Like, there is always opportunity. And remember, pod fade. Most people are not consistent in continuing forward. And the reason is because they're not doing their processes and they're not doing their funnels. So they have unrealistic expectations and they get disappointed and they give up. But you guys are empowered now. You know to create your processes and your funnels, and you know what your purpose is. So you're not going to give up. So you're going to be that very small percentage that is actually the top podcast in the world.
Yeah, I love it. This has been amazing. And before we wrap it up, this is the most important moment, because we need to name the winner.
Yes.
Of the giveaway that's going to get a one-on-one 30-minute session with Espree. So it's almost like you're going to get all of this information again, whatever you need from her.
But not again. We're going to go deep dive. We're going to deep dive. Yeah.
I love it. Okay. So drum roll. Jill Goldsberry.
Jill.
Here, and you are still listening. Put yourself in the chat and say, here.
Congrats, Jill. I love it. Awesome.
Jill, are you here? Jill, are you here? Jill, are you here? Woo!
Jill may be like me, where she has oh, yay, Jill. She says, wow, thank you. And I just want to scroll up too to see if I'm missing any other questions. Perfect. Awesome. It looks like struggling to get reviews from my listeners on Medium. Yolanda, I got your back. Why don't you take me up on the 15-minute thing, and I'll help you there. Make sure you have that link. And yeah.
Hey, so Jill, you have my email. Email me after this. I'm going to put you in touch with Espree. She's going to send you a special link so that you can arrange that one-on-one session for her.
Yeah, and Jill, we're going to do a deep dive into why you want to have your show, your personality type in the right show for you, how you grow your show, how to market. I mean, all the stuff that I can't possibly get into in 1 hour, we're going to dive into those things so you feel really just supercharged to be a successful podcaster.
I love it. And honestly, as I'm like sitting here right now, Espree, I think that we even have to like come up with like another Uplevel session for you. Like,
love it.
One like just on marketing, because that alone is so much information. So we're gonna have you back at some point.
Thank you.
This has been amazing, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been amazing. I hope that you feel that you have just up-leveled yourself right now, and you feel encouraged to go out and start your podcast. Espree, I love you. This has been amazing. Everyone, have an amazing Wednesday. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.